Salvate omnes, and welcome to the second tutorial this spring semester 2024 at Campbell University, Latin 102. I am your friendly guide in the learning of Latin, and we're going to take a look for this week at chapter 11. As always, you'll want to read carefully through the grammar topic, paying particular attention to the examples that they give for both the Latin and English translation. And then once again, make sure you're doing the self-tutorial exercises in the back of the book for which you have the answers before you tackle the Sententia Antiquae, which is the focus of this video lesson. This chapter grammatically is not too difficult other than learning forms. I think you'll agree that in English, if you're learning personal pronouns, excuse me, I, of me, to me, by, with, from me, or the plural, we, us, of us, and so forth, those things just have to be memorized. And so I is just I, and me is just me, you is just you. And similarly in Latin, Latin has different words for these personal pronouns, which of course stand in for proper nouns. In Latin, generally we use a personal pronoun to emphasize the speaker's point of view, as they say here. And so oftentimes, as you know by now, Latin will not have a separate subject or even pronoun, but the context of this is that Latin was a very rhetorical language because speaking, not writing, was the dominant way to communicate publicly in the ancient world before the printing press and technology and the like. And so this allowed the speaker to emphasize some particular point of view. So instead of saying, I believe, or I feel, instead of just saying sentio, you could say ego sentio, which alerts the reader that you're putting a bit of emphasis on that feeling. So please take a look at this and read it carefully. Demonstratives, as the term suggests, also is used for emphasizing. If you're doing something in a demonstrative manner, it's something that is more than normal. Again, we think of demonstration, but of course here we're talking about grammar. So instead of saying he is nice, we say he is nice. And so Latin, once again, will use a particular word to indicate that demonstrative form, which is indicated in this chapter. So big picture, this is not too difficult because the context will tell you. And then remember, if you feel like these grammar concepts are vague, well, it just takes a little bit of practice, but more to the point, remember, you're always going to have a closed or limited range of examples of Latin that you will have to learn and be responsible for on the test. And so, like anything else, you try to learn it, but if not, you just may have to memorize it and interpret it as a set piece. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in our okay. So Latin 102, spring 2024, and of course we're talking about chapter 11 and our Sententiae Antiquae, which literally means ancient sentences, but probably ancient proverbs or sayings would be closer to the mark. All right, let's take a look at that here. I should have had this up earlier. I apologize. Let me pull up some of our aids. This is also helpful right here in terms of the declensions. All right, here we go. So the first one, again, please read it aloud, is Vertus tua me amicum tibi facit by Horace, 65 BC to 8 BC. So Virtus, we should be able to recognize this as virtue. Now, virtue in Latin, it's an important word. Caesar uses it a lot. As you can see, it can mean strength, power, courage, bravery, worth, manliness, virtue, character, or excellence. So it depends on the context. Certainly, we can just translate it as virtue. Keeping in mind it describes something more than moral qualities, but something that is, a strength of humans in terms of distinguishing them from the animals and even the gods. So your virtue, me friend to you makes. So virtue, your me friend to you makes. So, but of course we want to put it together. So your virtue makes me a friend of yours, literally a friend to you. So you could also give a more polished translation, namely, your virtue makes me your friend. Notice how in English you might often say is that I am your friend because you are a good person, which certainly is the sense of it, but I would probably keep it more literal. So I'm going to say your virtue makes me a friend to you, a friend of yours. Because TB, as you can see in the charts, is in the dative. So oops, let me take out the bold here. Your virtue makes facit, so that's facit, makes me a friend, again, literally to you, just because TB is in the dative. Might be better to show you actually do they have it in this one? I don't know. Let me see here. TB, yeah. So here it is. So literally to you or for you, because that's what TB means. But again, obviously it sounds a little bit effective in here. It's saying that the grammar is awkward, but we're doing Latin, not English, and so we're going to keep it literal. Your virtue makes me a friend to you. All right, let's take a look at the next one. The next one reads Id solum est carum mihi by Terence. We mentioned before that Terence often, he was a writer of comedy, and so we don't have a larger context, so this is probably not as serious as it sounds, but nevertheless, it means this alone is dear to me. So id, this, solum, alone, is dear to me. So this one is fairly straightforward once we recognize that id is a demonstrative pronoun. So I'm not going to do this for all of them, but you can see here is our id right here. And so we're going to say this. Sometimes it could be it or this thing, but in this case, I'm just going to say this. So this alone, to go back to the example. This alone is dear to me. So this alone is dear to me. That one's fairly straightforward. Carum means dear. Mihi means to me. So here we had TB to you. Here we have mihi to me. And then the rest of it is just largely knowing the vocab. But of course, here we have a demonstrative pronoun, which is one of the grammar topics in this chapter. All right, moving on here to tres, si vales bene es ego valio by Pliny, who is a writer of some note as well. If you are well, it is good. I am well. So here they're using ego to emphasize that I am well, because valio means I am well because it's first person singular. So this goes all the way back to chapters 1 and 2. Again, if we're not sure, this is a good opportunity to continue to practice our skills. So here's our present active indicative, first person singular. And it means I, because that's what first person is. I am here I'm going to say I am well. You could say I am strong, I am healthy. Um, I don't know, powerful, that isn't quite, I don't think captures the sense of it. So I'm going to go ahead and write, if you are well, it is good, I am well. If you are well, it is good, I am well. Okay, so if you are well, because it ends in S, that's second person singular, it is good, I am well. So these are fairly straightforward. They're not real long, fairly easy to hopefully comprehend, especially if you look up words and take your time looking back at the grammar charts. Bene est mihi quod tibi bene est. So here, one of the nice things about the Wheelocks, it does tend to repeat patterns to help us learn this. So bene means, that's where we get words like beneficial. So it is good to me because, or it is, you could say probably it is good for me. So mihi could mean to or for, so you have to kind of play around to see which one is more idiomatic or standard English. So it is good for me because it is good for you. So here's a good example of mihi. So just to go back to put this in the grammatical context. So here we have, let's see, it must be on the previous page. Yeah. So here we have mihi, and then of course we had as well tb. And you can see how to translate those pronouns. So going back to our example, it is good to me because, or for me, it is good for me because it is good for you. It is good for me because it is good for you. All right, so quad is an important conjunction, so please make note of that because it is good for you. Quinque, vale est tu bene vale, so fairly straightforward. So farewell, and you well fare. So this one we're going to be a little more creative with our translation. So farewell, because that's what vale means. So if we're not sure, we can look it up here. You can see vale means farewell or goodbye. But then this last part's a little bit tricky because it literally means and you well fare. So I'm going to say farewell. Notice in English, we'd probably have to say, and I hope you fare well. So, or farewell and may you fare well. And so this one requires a little bit of creativity. Otherwise, it just sounds awkward in English. So I'm going to say farewell and you are, and may you fare well. We'll go with that one. So I'm going to change slightly the mood on that. Farewell. Let's see, how do they have the, they just have a period there, I guess. So may you fare well. So this one is a little bit tricky in terms of how to translate it, but the meaning is clear, just that the grammar may not be. So farewell and you will fare. So, all right, so that one's a little bit awkward, but that's okay. Number 6, quid he de te nunc sentiunt. So quid means what. So, and then, so sentiunt means thinking or feeling. We also have cogito, cogitant, but here it just means thinking or feeling. It's generally how Cicero uses it. So if we look up sentiunt, it can mean perceive, feel, experience, think. So I'm going to go think in this particular case because Cicero tends to be a little more philosophical. So what are these? So these men, it just says these. So what are these thinking about this now? So what are these? So in other words, what are these men? So even though men is not there, but if we go back to our demonstrative pronouns, you'll see that, where is it at here? Do they have it? Where is it? It should be here. Don't see it there, maybe. But if we look up on Whitaker's words, you can see it's a pronoun. So these in the plural. Maybe I just missed it in the layout here. But anyway, so it means these, but these in terms of these men, is Cicero is probably critiquing some actions of his fellow senators or politicians. So with that said, we're going to go back and look at the example. In fact, here's our verb. So to feel, to perceive, think, experience. And then you can see all the words in English that come from this Latin word. And then, as you know by now, just choose one of them. So probably think or perceive is probably your best option. So what are these? It doesn't say it, but I think we would probably expect it in English. So I'm going to use a bracket. What are these men thinking now, nunc, about this? So what are these men thinking now about this? Go back and take a look at the example. So remember Latin doesn't use is or are. What are these men now thinking? So nunc means now. What are these men now thinking de te? Actually, de te means about you. I made a mistake there because te is not this, but referring back to a person. So I apologize. Let's change that there. So about you. So de te. Okay. Moving on to octo, number 8. Video namenem ex eis hodie esse amicum tibi. So I see no one from those today to be a friend to you. So again, I'm doing like a literal translation. I see no one from these today to be a friend to you. So now we have to think about how to translate. But before we do that, notice that this naminem, Nemo, is the direct object because it's third declension accusative singular, namely ending in em. So there's third declension, accusative singular, neminem. But then we also can review and improve our grammar. Ex eis, ex is always followed by the ablative. So if we look at our declension chart, take a look at second declension ablative plural, which you can see is is. So ex eis is where we're getting that. And then we talked some about some of these words. Remember, esse means to be. That's the infinitive form of the verb be. So I see no one from these today to be a friend to you. And again, this is where we got to be a little bit creative with our translation. I probably in English would say, I don't see today that any of these men are your friend. That is actually probably a good translation. The only problem with that is then it leaves out no one. And so I'm going to try to keep it more literal so you can follow the Latin here. I see no one from these men who today are your friends. So here's another one where you're going to have to be a little bit creative with your translation. And so I don't see anyone, or actually let me say I see no one from these. Now it doesn't say who, but I'm going to put that in here because we don't have relative pronouns until chapter 17, but we would need it in English. I see no one from these who are your friend. But then we still need hodie, which means today. So I see no one from these today. So I'm going to put that actually right in there. So you can see it doesn't like that grammar, but that's fine, right? We're smarter than Google Docs. But again, probably the better English translation, but it doesn't quite fit the Latin because Latin is not English, and this is a language that existed over 2,000 years ago. So we'd be more surprised if it did fit than if it didn't. I don't see any of these men today who are your friend, but again, that would be changing the grammar in significant ways. Novem, the men see the head of Cicero on the rostra were able. So the men were able to see the head of Cicero on the rostra. So this one is fairly straightforward. Let me write it out and then I will explain the grammar. Let's see, did I miss one here? I think I did. Let's see, which one did I miss? Let's see. Farewell. Good. Farewell. I forgot number 7. Let me throw that in there. So sorry. 6, 7. Okay. So let me go back to that one here. Sorry, guys. Right. So number 7, omnes idem sentiunt. So again, using the same verb here. So omnes means all men. Idem means the same. All men think the same. All men think the same. Interesting footnote here. What is meant by that? Well, Cicero is one of the great writers about natural law. And natural law means that because we're human, we all have the capacity through right experience and education to think morally, as Plato argued earlier, about the good. And so that seems to be the sense of it right here that Cicero is invoking. So all men think the same. All right, moving on to the next one here is, we did that one there. So now going on to number 9. So the men, literally human beings. So the men, or probably you could say even the people. The people, because homines means human beings, but human beings in English sounds too abstract. So man, human being, person. But if it's in plural, we can say people. So I'm going to go with people on this one, although populus would be probably more strictly speaking, but I think it works. So the people were able to see the head of Cicero on the rostra. So let me write that down. That'll explain it. So the people, homines, were able to see, pot errant, the head, caput, on the rostra. So the people were able to see the head, of Cicero, on the rostra. So the people, homines, were able, pot errant, to see, videre, the head, caput, of Cicero, Ciceronis, on the rostra. Just a couple of things here to aid you. Of Cicero is third declension genitive singular. So third declension genitive singular is is. That's why we have Ciceronis. And then here, literally on the rostras, it's in the plural, but that's just a difference between Latin and English. And so a lot of languages have the difference. For example, in German, you would say, meine Brille ist neu, which literally means my glasses is new, whereas in English we say are new. And so there's lots of differences between languages. The context of this is after the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. As you know, Rome was enmeshed in civil wars, and Cicero eventually met his own demise by soldiers of Mark Antony who cut off his head because Cicero had said some unfavorable things about Antony for quite some time, as a matter of fact. And so they cut off his head and displayed it in the forum on the rostra. So, yeah. Number 10, non omnis eadem amant aut eestem cupidates studiaque habent, Horace. So this one's going to require looking up some words. So let me tell you what you're going to have when you look up the words using a dictionary or Whitaker's words. Not all the same love or the same desires and devotions have. So not everyone loves the same things or has the same desires and devotions. So let me write that down and then I'll try to explain it in greater detail. So not everyone not everyone loves the same things or has the same desires and devotions. So not everyone loves the same things. So non omnis amant eadem. So not everyone loves the same things. Or has, habent, the same desires. They're really like Cupids. The same desires and, did I say or? And devotions. Let me check that there. No, I did say and, okay. So studia is where we get words like studious or even a student, but here it is in the second declension accusative plural. So second declension accusative plural, accusative ends in a, so studiae. Again, if we're not sure about that, we need to start getting more and more comfortable doing research and looking up words. That's what research is looking stuff up. So studiae, there it is, second declension, accusative plural. Again, only the context will tell you. So I'm going to go with devotions. If you want to say pursuits, that's fine too. I don't think the other ones fit Horace's language based on his other works. So only the context will tell you how is it being used, but in this case, it's being used as a direct object. The context tells us that, and the verb tells us that. And other ways to translate it that are not in the accusative, for example, the nominative or vocative just wouldn't make any sense. All right, the last one here, actually the last two. Literally, nor with you I am able to live, nor without you, by Marshall. So we can start with the subject, I am able to live neither with you nor without you. So again, you can change the word order. So I am able to live neither with you nor without you. So I am able to live, possum vivere, neither with you, nec tecum, nor without you, sine te. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. And the last one here, verus amicus est alter idem. A true friend is a second self or another self. A true friend is a second self, literally an alter ego, somebody you can be intimate with, confide in. A true friend, verus amicus, is a second self, another self, even an alter ego. All right, so that's fairly straightforward as far as these things go. Let's take a look at the longer passage. The longer passage is very famous in Latin literature. In fact, it's been represented in art many, many times. So here you can see in your book, this is an artist rendering in the 19th century of Cicero right there calling out and shaming Catiline for his lack of virtue. There are the other senators, and Catiline was trying to undermine the authority of the Senate by corrupting the Republic in Rome. And Cicero made many, many famous speeches where it was clear that Catiline had transgressed his moral probity in terms of living an upright life of virtue, as Cicero thought was expected of Republican virtue, and the dignity of being a senator. Okay, so with that said, let's take a look at the actual text here. I can get it here. Let's see. Let's see here. Somehow it has... No, it doesn't like that. Let's see here. Okay, fix that screen there. So Cicero denounces Catiline in the Senate. Again, they give you some additional commentary over here, including vocab, which I recommend that you take a look at. And again, I really encourage you to read it aloud to help you learn it. Quid facis, Catiline, quid cogites? Sentimus magna vitiae insidiesque tues. O tempore, o mores, senatus haec intelligit. Consul videt, hic tamen vivet, etiam in senatum venit, etiam nunc consilia agere audet, oculos designat ad mortem os, et nos boni viri nihil facimus, ad mortem te, Catilina, consul et senatus ducere debent, consilium habimus et agere debimus, si nunc non agimus, nos aperte dico, ramus, fugi nunc, Catilina, et ducte cum amicos tuos nobisque rimanere non potest, non te, non istos, non consilia vestra tolerabo. So, it's probably one of the more challenging, longer texts we've had. So, again, there's just no substitution for taking your time, looking up words, and just working through the passage. With that said, we have, and then use the punctuation to help you chunk it or break it up. So, quid facis, that means what are you doing? It ends in S, that's second person singular. Facio, facis, facit, facimus, facitis, faciunt. There's our osmos tisnit. So again, if we're not sure, we'll look that up on Whitaker's Words, which we need to do. So it's present active indicative, second person singular. So what are you doing, Catiline? And we'll put his name back in this spelling in the nominative form, so to speak. So what are you doing? Is our longer passage. So what are you doing, Catiline? Okay. So what are, let me go ahead and give this a title as well. Let's see, what are they calling it? Cicero denounces, I believe. Oops. Cicero denounces Catiline in the Senate. So Cicero denounces Catiline in the Senate. We'll go with that right there. Should work for us. Helps our organization. Okay. So what are you doing, Catiline? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Quid cogites? What are you thinking? We perceive, so sentimus can mean think, but we saw earlier it can also mean to perceive. So mus means we. We perceive, and what do we perceive? Um, your great vices and treachery. We perceive your great vices and treachery. So this one's obviously going to require looking up some words because this is new vocabulary for us. So we perceive your great vices, which is second declension accusative plural neuter. So that's why it ends in A. But the word itself is going to have to be looked up, and you'll see it means vices. And then this word too is, I believe, new for us, but it means treachery. So that one is a little bit tricky, but if something is insidious, clearly it's of some kind of moral deficiency. So we have the word insidiousness in English, which kind of means a kind of treachery or if you will, political betrayal. And then this is one of the most famous lines in all of Latin literature. Oh, the times, oh, the customs, or oh, the mores. And so oh, the times, oh, I'll say customs of the literally mores. So oh, the times, oh, the customs. Let me change that punctuation so it's consistent with our Latin text. So oh, the times, oh, the customs. The Senate understands this. So senatus haec intelligit. The Senate understands this. So Cicero is not speaking for himself, but on behalf of the Senate, as we saw in that picture earlier, understands this. Now, what is it that the Senate understands? Is, of course, his treachery and his lack of dignity and virtue. So the Senate understands this. The consul sees. So now Cicero is the consul who's seeing. As you know, Rome had two consuls. Again, that sounds a little bit awkward. So, of course, in English, perhaps say that the consul sees what you have done or what you are doing. The Latin doesn't have that. It just says the consul sees. But it is Cicero who is the one seeing. Nevertheless, he lives. So, nevertheless, he lives. Now, it was by law, you would not kill or execute a Roman senator, but Cicero's rhetorical point is that how can you live a life of shame because of lack of dignity and virtue? So this is more of a rhetorical point than an actual legal point that Cicero is making. So nevertheless, he lives, and then he lives, as if to underscore that. So he lives. Of course, this is where we get words like vivacious or vivid. He lives. He even comes in, or he also even comes into the Senate. In other words, how dare he? He even comes into the Senate. So how dare he show his face? He ought to be ashamed to be a Roman, and especially a senator, given his treachery and his crimes and conspiracy against the Republic. Also now plans, he does, he dares. So even now he dares to carry out his plans. So even now he dares to carry out his plans. So as I said, this one's a little bit tricky. This is one of the more demanding texts we've had so far. So let me try to explain this one. Is even now, etiam nunc. he dares, audit, like audacity, to carry out, like agenda, and then concilia is neuter, accusative, second person plural, ending in A. So even now, he dares to carry out his plans. He designs with his eyes toward the death of us. In other words, that his eyes, so literally, he designat. Let's look this up for other possibility, but it is where we get words like designate. He marks, he describes, he indicates. Let's go with this one. He is planning. Let's go with that one. That actually works fairly nice. So he is planning with his eyes our death. So he is planning with his eyes, literally to the death of us, but we're going to say he is planning with his eyes our death. He is planning with his eyes our death. Now, probably one of the more interesting things, or not so much interesting, but a grammar point to note in this case is with his eyes, because second declension dative plural is is. So second declension dative plural is is. And so when we have dative, we use with. Could be ablative too, really doesn't matter, but that's why it ends in is. So he is planning or scheming with his eyes our death. And we, good men, we do nothing. In other words, he's talking about we in terms of Cicero and the other senators. And we, good men, do nothing. So, and we, et nos, good men, boni viri, do nothing, or if you want to say we do nothing, that would work too. So here's a good example where fakimos means we do, fakis means you do. So you can see there's our difference in how do we conjugate our verbs. Again, if your verbs are a little bit trickier to teach online, a little bit, and just harder to learn more in general, but there is that site called Verbex, but generally we talked about, just to give one more sort of footnote on this, let me put it right here so we don't mess up our order here, but so we have our principal parts, so facio, so these are the principal parts that our book gives, but then facio means I do, or even I am doing. Fakis means you do, or you are doing. Fakit means he does, or she does, or it does, or he or she, it is doing. Fakimus, which we have here, equals, is we are, we do, or again, I'm not going to write this for all of them, but you get the point. We need it in present tense is the point. We are doing. Fakitis means you all, or you all. So we can put that in idiomatic English. You all are doing. Misspelled that one there. Yeah. And then the last one, faciunt, means they do, or I'll write the full one here, they are doing. So this goes back to our os most tisnit, O-S-T, most tisnunt. So that's the key to learning verbs, is to understand the meaning of the word by the base or the stem, in other words, vocabulary, but then be able to identify the proper form of the conjugated verb by the ending, in this case, os most tisnit. All right, so we've talked about that before, but it's always a good review. So and we do nothing, right? To death you, Catiline, consul and senate ought to lead. So here we'll probably start here. So the consul and senate ought to lead you, Catiline, to your death. So the consul and senate ought to lead you to your death. Now, again, he could not do it by law, but he's talking rhetorically because of the shame that Cicero is arguing he has brought upon himself. So the consul and senate, consul et senatus, ought to lead or should lead. You, Catiline, literally to death, but I put into your death. Concilium, we have a plan and we should carry it out. So it's not just you that has a plan, we have a plan too. We have a plan and should carry it out. We have a plan, concilium habemus, and we should carry it out like an agenda. If we do not do this now, we, I openly say, are mistaken. So if we do not do this now, we, let's see, I can't remember what, we, yeah, I said this twice. So we, and then I openly say, oops, are, I'm going to say in error, but literally we are wrong. So let's go back and take a look at this again. So we have a plan and we ought to carry it out. If we do not carry the plan out now, we I openly say are wrong, are in error. Let's change that punctuation there. As always, you might be able to manipulate the word order a little bit, but hopefully you see how that works. Flee now, Catiline, and take your friends with you. So there's the imperative, going back to chapter 1. So flee now, Catiline, and take your friends with you. So flee now, fuge nunc, Catiline, and take, duc, your friends with you. So this is a good review of the imperative, chapter 1. Notice the imperative doesn't end in osmos tisnit, but has a different ending, which you may recall from chapter 1. So please look at chapter 1. Of course, giving a command is the function of an imperative. So flee now, Catiline, and take your friends with you. In other words, your co-conspirators. You are not able to remain among us. So you are not able to remain among us. So you are not able, non potus, to remain among us or with us. That works as well. And not you, not your kind, not your plans, I will tolerate. So Latin likes to put the verb at the end, so maybe I'll start with this first. I will not tolerate you, your kind, and did I have a conjunction here? I will not tolerate you, not your kind, not your plans. So vestra means yours. Not your plans. Because once again, this is second declension accusative plural ending in, so second declension accusative plural ending in a, as you can see, because it's a neuter noun, concilium. So this one is a little bit tricky. I remember doing this several years ago myself for the first time, and it was not the easiest. So just sort of keep that in mind. I've said this several times, and I'll continue to say it. Learning a language doesn't matter if it's Latin or a modern language. You just got to know the vocabulary. So Shakespeare is easy if you know the vocabulary. If not, then even as native English speakers, we have a hard time deciphering his text. So same thing here. If you take the time to look up words in a dictionary, again, you're doing college level Latin, you really should have a dictionary, or in the very least, use Whitaker's words consistently. You're going to find it's just a lot easier. Otherwise, you're probably not understanding what you're doing in ways that you otherwise could. All right, so that is it for this week's lesson. Take a look at some of the other things. Don't forget to think about it. They give you some prompts here. You will have a short essay on your test. And then next week, we have the perfect active system, which is actually a fairly important grammar topic. So that'll be next week, and then you'll have a week of review. In other words, there won't be any video lesson, and then you'll have your first test in D-Rich at a time that we will organize. Okay? All right, so as always, please email me or post questions if you have any questions about the material. I'm always happy to answer and help in any way I can. Valete omnis.